So without further ado, let's bring out the director, Edson Oda, and the producer, Jason Michael Berman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's really difficult to know what to say because this time when I watched the movie and they asked, is there one moment in your life that you would like to recreate, or a moment and I had a flashback to being in my crib as a baby and my sister looking in the crib, and she looked at me with so much love. And I remember that, and somebody told me, it's impossible. No kid has a memory before they're 2 years old, but I think they do. Does anyone remember being in a crib? Yeah, see? This is a special audience. And we give a thumb, and the thumb tonight, I'm kind of channeling Roger a little bit here, because this thumb, something in watching the movie, I'm emotional about it because things are so difficult in the world right now, but I really do think people are good, and I do think that there's a lot to live for, and I don't know, the movie just, so many thoughts. I think that I'm just going to, you probably would make me sign that thing and not let me come onto the world to live, but, so, I don't know, let's just we give a thumb. Will you explain the thumbs?
This is a cast of Roger's thumb. It was Roger's idea, and it is one of the most treasured memories of any film festival in the world, I think, and we give these with love.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you both. This is amazing.
This is amazing. Thank you so much.
And so now we're supposed to do the Q&A, and so let's call out Brian Tellerico, the managing editor at RogerEbert.com, and Sheila O'Malley, a writer also at RogerEbert.com, and they're going to, you'll take the seats and they will conduct the Q&A. Thank you. And we'll take the thumbs back.
Thank you.
Oops, do you have a microphone? We do. Okay, everyone outside?
I think so, yeah. Whatever works.
There's someone, yeah.
There's a lot of light here.
All right.
All right.
I'm going to try to gather myself emotionally. I don't know about everybody else, but the end of that movie destroys me a little bit. Let's start with, I think, something that'll place some interesting context with the film for everybody, which is the origin story for it, what you experienced and what you were trying to unpack with
100%. Yeah, just first I want to just thank this amazing audience. I feel like it's so, I've never seen an audience that engaged and that so much love, laughing at the jokes, so it feels, and yeah, you guys are awesome. This movie theater is just amazing, and so it's just like to mention that. And yeah, the origin, there are a lot of things. I think the main thing, which my uncle is inspired on, my uncle, Will, who is the main character, inspired by my uncle, and he took his own life. And interesting because when he did that, for me, it was like 12 at the time. It's pretty much I used to see him as this kind of figure of failure, And I used to listen, my mom saying like he was too good, I think, to live in this world. So it was gave me the sense of maybe you can't be too good or too nice that in some sort of way you won't survive. And in some sort of way, I would see him as this figure of failure, someone who couldn't succeed. Until a point there, I start feeling, things and emotions the same way he was feeling. And then I could empathize with him in some sort of way and understand more of his journey and things that he went through that were very difficult, but also things that he went through that were very joyful and inspiring. So I think this movie and Will are kind of a mix of him and also myself and my fears of becoming like him, but also embracing who I am as well. So I think that's kind of the genesis of it.
You speak about empathizing with him, and the theme of this festival being empathy, and it strikes me that the film is about empathy machines, people looking at screens and experiencing other lives and feeling empathy. So can you speak about that aspect of not just the film, but empathy as a guiding principle in what you do?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because as Roger would say, that movies that are an empathy machine, and I really believe that you can go through so many experiences with the characters, and especially in this movie, like if you see like that, TVs are in some sort of way a kind of empathy machine as well, and you living, Will in this case is living through those TVs, and I feel like every movie or a good movie, or at least they try to embrace that in some sort of way to make people feel something or think in a different way or get something from the movie rather than just, be here and the movie is there. So there's some kind of connection necessary from the audience to what's on the screen, and actually what's on the screen represents the filmmakers and actors and everyone who work on the film. So it's always come up to how people are connected to through film.
How long was this sort of idea or concept? Have you been walking around with this in your head for years? Like the idea,
Yeah, no,
the
it's interesting.
story?
It's a great question because I had the idea, I think it was around like 2016. I graduated from film school, and then I was thinking like, how can I write this piece in a way that it would be small, and I felt like this movie would cost like $100K or something, and it wasn't how things came out, but that was what I had in my mind. And then at some point I got to the Sundance Labs and everything, but from 2016, and it was just writing until like 2018 or something. And that's where I met Jason, and Jason, you can also speak to that if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I got Edson's brilliant script submitted to me by his manager in January of 2018. Actually, it was during the last weekend of the Sundance Film Festival. So I had just been at Sundance for 7 or 8 days, watching great independent films, and Eric sent me and my colleague Will the script, and we read it right away. And of course, you're coming out of Sundance, having seen all these great indies, and here we are. We're reading this script, and it's just so brilliant and fresh and emotional. And along with the screenplay was an incredible lookbook and mood reel, and the bicycle sequence, like not the version of the bicycle sequence you saw tonight, but a version that Edson had done with a bunch of his friends from USC Film School. And I was just blown away. And I think I mentioned this earlier today, but some of my favorite filmmakers whose work I got introduced to by starting to attend Sundance were people like Spike Jonze and Michel Gondry and Charlie Kaufman, and I saw little bits of each of those filmmakers throughout this project. And so I just fell in love with it, and then we let Edson's manager know that we would love to meet with him on it. We met with him on it right away. we partnered with another production company and ended up working with Edson on the script and on additional materials and casting over the course of the next, year plus until we were able to really start putting the cast together and start being able to put financing together. And the thing about this movie was, it was definitely complex in the production of it because in essence it was really two movies in one. It was everything that you're seeing on the TV screens is not stock footage. That's all original footage, and then all of that we shot all of that stuff over the course of 9 days, and then all that stuff had to be edited. And then we shot all the stuff with the house. So the movie was really like, it was the pre-production of the stuff within the TVs, and then it was the pre-production of the main part of the movie simultaneously while Edson was jumping back and forth between pre-production and working with his editor to edit all of that footage. And all of that footage, for the most part, is being played live while the actors are actually in the living room of the house. And so it was very complicated. And so we shot the movie over the summer of 2019, between July and the end of August, or actually into the first week of September. And Edson had such a clear vision for what the movie was that editorial was actually one of the shortest editorial periods on any movie I've been involved with. We picture locked the film in December and we premiered it at Sundance in January of 2020. So it was a really expedited schedule, and for a first-time feature narrative director, unheard of in terms of how quickly the movie was from prep into its premiere.
And then you can both speak about this a little bit. Then the world fell apart after it premiered. I mean, it plays at Sundance in January. You and I have talked about this a little bit. I saw it at Sundance, and then I saw it 6 months later, or roughly, in the midst of a pandemic where we're all locked in the house watching things on TVs. And it really felt like, oh, this now has a different added resonance. Can you speak to how the pandemic influenced the both artistic and the business aspect of this film?
Yeah, we're not predicting, that to happen. And I hope when I release my next movie, nothing, as bad happens.
Better luck.
So, otherwise, I'm just gonna stop making movies. People are gonna say, stop making movies. But yeah, no, it's interesting because in some sort of way, all the themes like loneliness, mental health, issues or lack of connection, there were themes that we, after experienced the isolation of the pandemic, we got even stronger, and it was kind of a coincidence. It was interesting because people would, and we released the movie in theaters, but then also mostly like people were watching online, and they're just like sending me messages saying, "Oh, this movie is really powerful, especially for the time period that I'm living now." Just by myself and watching, screens. So in some sort of way, like people were seeing themselves and connecting and having empathy. I feel like it was easier for them to empathize with the characters, especially Will. I remember when you're making the film, a lot of people couldn't relate with him that much because they're like, oh, he's so close up. He's like, why he's feeling like that? And depression is like that, you can't understand until you go through something like that. And I felt the same way, with my uncle. So it was just interesting because while the pandemic was happening, people could empathize more with him because, oh, okay, so I can understand what he's feeling.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty extraordinary because, we obviously finished Sundance at the end of January 2020, and we had all these other festivals, lined up, including, I know Janet Pearson is here, we had South by Southwest lined up, we had tons of incredible film festivals lined up, and we were supposed to go to Sundance London too, in June, and like Israel and Tel Aviv, like all over the world. And, when you make these films, you want to share them with people and audiences, which I just have to say, I'm so grateful that we were invited here tonight because we didn't have enough of these experiences with this movie, and we got to do it here tonight, 3 years later, which is amazing. But it was, you know, like, so yes, we both went through our own depression because of this process. But the one thing we were able to do is we sent a lot of links out to this movie. Michael Barker doesn't know that, but we sent a lot of links out to this movie. And over the course of the summer of 2020, now Michael will know that if he hears about it. But we did. I mean, and I think that was very fulfilling for us because we would get these responses and these emails back from people that we shared it with. And I think, like Edson said, people were able to even more now so connect with Will because of what it was that we were all going through as on a global, you know, societal level. And it was meaningful. And I'll say this, one of the people that we shared one of the links to the movie to was Spike Jonze, who's one of Edson's idols as a filmmaker, and I'll let Edson talk a little bit about that if you want to.
Yeah, no, it was crazy because we shared the link with him, and then also I was just talking on the phone with him, and he was saying how much he loved the film, and I was just, you know, asking him questions about how he made her, and he was very generous with his time. And then cut to some weeks later, was working with him in a project, you know, and helping him and reading his stuff and giving opinions, and he was listening to what I was saying. And but it was a crazy process of sharing this movie with people and people who could connect or could understand where you know, Will was coming from and all these characters are coming from. They would really, you know, show themselves vulnerable and and from that we would have like a strong connection, you know. So
Yeah, there were times I was watching, I was like, I'm seeing myself in like each one. Oh, okay, I recognize that. Can I ask you a little bit about your writing process? Like,
sure.
What I love so much about this film, and it's so different, is that it's people just talking to each other. And I was feeling it because I saw it via a link. So I'm sitting in lockdown in my house, and so seeing it, it's how it should be seen. I mean, these visuals as well. But feeling everybody just listening. So I don't really know what the question is, but I know the resistance to that kind of thing. It's like show, not tell, you know, it's like, well, there's so many films where people just talk and we want to hear what they have to say. So
yeah, thank you. You know, I feel it's hard, you know. It was funny because while we were shooting it, there are a lot of pages here, you know, the people are talking a lot. and then we're like, oh, maybe we can just like show some things with silence and try to, but the interesting thing about what they talk and how we see that is because of the context. In a sense, those people, they only have that opportunity to talk and to make connections. So it's interesting, even though they're not the most creative things or what they're talking, but it's more about the talking combined with the experience of this might be my last day in this, whatever it is, you know, and creating this kind of stakes for them. So it's even when they, you know, touch water, it's just like a big deal for them. So I feel that's why, even though it's very like, oh, there's two people, usually it's just like two people interacting, not more than that.
right, yeah.
Just in the end, then you have the four people. But it's more like about two people, usually Will and the character. But it's usually the characters is interacting is a baby, and Will is just watching that baby, you know, react to the word through words. It's almost like, I think it's interesting because you're watching talking babies, in some sort of way.
Right.
I think I'm just saying it's not. Yeah, I don't know if it's.
Well, this leads me sort of to the second, was like, to get a cast to kind of get that and to feel that. Like, can you talk about how you found these amazing people?
Yeah, I don't even know. Yeah, it's, but they fell in love with the script, and we have like great producer and agents who could send out, but a lot of people who it was more like I understand those people, you know, and I would share my story with my uncle, or share, you know, stories of places they've been, you know, and then okay, it was like, I understand that. I went through that too, so it was more like in some sort of way, a group therapy, and everyone trying to connect with one another, but also trying to create something they understood and want to share with the world. So I feel like that's where all those amazing actors came to try to work with me.
There's a version of this movie that someone else would have made, and a worse version that's way more like digital sci-fi. You kept it very purposefully. The word I always used when I wrote about it was tactile.
Yeah.
Like there's old-fashioned pens and paper and sanding things and building things. Can you speak about the importance of that grounded approach to what is basically sci-fi, sort of?
Yeah. No, I feel like there are many reasons. Like one, the concept itself is so surreal and distant that I feel like it's important to have something that ground you, you know, and you see like, okay, this is reality. And if you start going, the concept is crazy, and then you start going to something that it's so futuristic, then it's hard to pull back the audience to, okay, this is part of your world. No, it's not, you know, all those iPads and whatever, it's not, it's still futuristic. So that's one. The other one is a lot of this film reflect my memories, my nostalgia and feelings, and especially like childhood, I think. And all of those are connected to something that's more, it's less digital, and it's more like analogic, how do you say? Analog, yeah. And it felt like it would need that kind of texture to just translate my childhood. Maybe if I, you know, was born even earlier, you know, like I was older, probably would be even, the technology would be older as well. So that's one of the reasons.
I wanted to ask you about the final scene. I mean, we were talking about the Walt Whitman, and my friend who's with me, we were just talking about Walt Whitman as well. So could you talk about that? And also, I've read a couple things about how you filmed that, and it was just,
Yeah.
it's so exhilarating.
That's a
overwhelming.
Scene, that's a scene that I directed them the least. And so, which is, you know, is good and bad because I'm not necessary. You know, the scene that's the best scene of the movie, and it's great because also it's the scene that I wrote the least as well because I didn't write it, so I didn't direct it, and I didn't write the scene, and it's the best scene of the movie.
You made choices.
But I made choices not to write and not to direct that scene. At least that makes me a good writer, but I don't know. But it was interesting because I always when I wrote as Walt Whitman because of That Poet Society, and it comes from the Yelp poem, Song of Myself, and I loved that moment, and I felt like, oh, and they read the poem and said like, yeah, this feels right, but I will definitely change it. You know, I will let whoever plays will choose something different, and you're gonna speak to himself. He needs to speak to himself, and then. When I was rehearsing with Winston, he was always trying to find something, you know, I was like trying to give him the false freedom. And he will always come back to me and say like, oh yeah, I have this poem, that's not as good, you know, and then that's not good. And then at some point we were just like, oh, and Benny was in one of these rehearsals, and he's like, oh, Winston, just, you know, do the poem, you know, like just do it. And say, I don't know, it's hard to just, these words are so difficult and everything is just, no, just do as Baku, you know, Baku from Black Panther. And he starts just rehearsing as Baku and with that kind of a weird accent and stuff. And we're just like, yeah, I think that's it. And then it's just like getting more into it. And it was very different, but the energy was there. So what you saw is kind of Baku, but in a different way, in some sort of way. So, and then when I direct the scene, was pretty much, I was very precise in a sense that my camera moves had to be this or that, or and the last scene I think should represent like the freedom, because through the whole movie, what I show like in the real world, everything is like handheld, point of view and stuff, and in his house are so precise, so on camera on dollies and moving the way I want to move, and then where we're shooting in the desert was like, okay, now. It's pretty much like you do whatever you have to do, and told my cinematographer, just follow them and follow your instincts, and then step away, and pray, and and then I think it works. Yeah.
It's so good. I mean, the way his face and body opens up in that final scene, it's a special effect. It really is. It's not even acting. Can you speak a little bit about the influences? I mean, people have mentioned Correia and Malick and some others that maybe you watched or considered while you were making it.
Yeah, no, there are a lot of influences, for sure. Like Correia, it's kind of the opposite of, is the sequel, before life and afterlife.
It's a great film called Afterlife, if you haven't seen it. By
Yeah,
Eric
and it's
Haase
funny
Correia.
because at some point I start calling that before life. Yeah. So it'll be interesting because I have the afterlife on Korea and this, and I think, yeah, also Terrence Malick, Tree of Life, a lot of all the scenes from childhood, and so I didn't have as much time to shoot this stuff as Terrence Malick has, but we tried. Yeah, nobody does. And then Wings of Desire is another one, and it's showing.
Saturday.
I really love to watch the Wings of Desire here because Wings of Desire. What's amazing is just about this angel who wants to know how it feels to be alive in some sort of way. So I always felt like Will would have this quality, and in the past, Will was more like an angel because he's never been alive in an earlier version, and then I made him like, okay, no, actually, this is a guy who suffered in the world. So
That's a drastic change.
that was drastic.
Yeah.
That was and Sundance was the gave me like my mentors and everything, gave the notes, say, yeah, you're talking about uncle and stuff, but you're not going as personal. You need to go personal in the story as a writer, but also as a person. And then Will's character became more human, and it used to be different.
Any questions from the audience? We do? I can't see anything. Right there, Sarah. Well, not Sarah, right there. Yep. No, right there. There. She's standing up.
Where was this filmed? Was the house, was it real? Did it exist? Did you have to build it? Was it set?
Oh.
I'm over here.
Yep.
Okay.
Over
there,
here
right there.
to your right.
Okay, now I
to
see.
your
Oh,
right.
yeah. I see.
She asked about where it was filmed.
Yeah, I think Jason can even speak more to that in terms of production.
Yeah, we so the movie was made in Utah, in Salt Lake City, Utah, and the surrounding area. The interior of the house was built in an old bread factory that we converted into a makeshift soundstage, and so we had an entire construction team, set deck team that worked under our incredible production designer, Dan Hermanson, and they built the entire interior of the house on that makeshift soundstage. And then in terms of the exterior of the house, we built that out in the Bonneville Salt Flats, about 60 miles west of Salt Lake City. And that was a really interesting process, getting the house, the exterior of the house built out there. But luckily, we had incredible weather during the days that we were filming. There had been some rain out there prior, which rarely happens, and because of that, it was a real challenge to haul equipment out there without it sinking into the sand. So we actually have videos of snowcats literally dragging equipment across the salt flats because the trucks kept getting stuck. And then all the other, B-roll stuff that was, or the stuff within the TV sequences that was shot within a mixture of Salt Lake and down in Sao Paulo, and then also in Los Angeles. So yeah, it was quite the production. But there was one version of the movie where we were actually going to try to find a physical house to make this in, and I think as we got closer, we realized with what Edson's vision was, there was no way really to find a house that matched that. So we actually raised a little bit more money within the final 4 weeks of pre-production to build everything, and it was definitely the smartest decision that as a team we made.
From the balcony in the center.
Up there.
I appreciated you explaining to us the inspiration behind the character for Will. I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more how you conceptualized the rest of that world of the souls, and how you came up with that, and your thoughts behind it, and your kind of understanding of like that world and how it works.
Yeah, I knew that you should be, you should see the souls as people. It should be grounded, and it should feel the most realistic possible. So, and there are a lot of conversations between with the actors, in a sense of who play the souls, to understand how they would react to the world, since it's the first time they're seeing everything. So, a good description is like they're almost like kids and children, as I was mentioning, but at the same time, they kind of had the knowledge. Everyone had the knowledge how things worked, but they didn't have their experience. So when we're discussing something that helped us shape at least the acting, the performance, was like, okay, everyone knows how New York City looks like. And you see in the movies that, is the subway, and that's like Times Square and everything. But how do you feel when the first time you go to New York and you're at Times Square, when you're smelling, the smell like in the subway or something? So it's totally different, because you know that, but you have the information, but you don't have the experience. And I think that was very cool. That was a training point for us and for the actors, because they couldn't understand. It's not like they're going to see water and say, oh my God, water. But it's more like, oh, this is water. I know that it, in contact with my body, I'm going to get wet. And then when they feel it, is the first time they're feeling, but they have the knowledge. So that was good, because then it grounded the performance to something that's not over the top, but at the same time gave the actor something that, there's always the novelty of what the person is experiencing.
Okay, next question.
Hi, so wow. I'm going to compliment you, and then I'm going to ask you a question. That was an amazing movie. It's so refreshing to see something with so many ideas that are brand new. I can honestly say I've never seen a film like that. And
Thank you.
the structure that I won't talk about the message and all that, but which is beautiful, but the structure that you put around the message was amazing. Who are you? How creative are you?
That's a good question.
I'm old enough so that my best friend's parents had a house just like that, with the fork and the spoon on the wall. And so you chose like a 1973 house to put them in. And then, yes, you wanted souls to be people, but you picked all kinds of shapes and sizes and personalities and people with 5-day-old shaves. And it was just amazing. And so, but my question is, so Will obviously had a life of pain, and with that, he brought to his job as an interviewer, some cruelty, because he was down and life was negative to him. And so when he was giving those people tests, they was like scaring them and stuff. But so my question is, tell me more about how you decided to have Will have that job, and why he was an interviewer, and why his job would be so difficult. Somebody in the system gave him a very hard job. He had to sit in judgment of people and choose somebody and then snuff out the other souls. And that was all extremely difficult. So here's a movie about, we want Will to see beauty in life, and he had a painful life in the real world. And then when he goes to another world, somebody's given him a really hard job.
It got terrible, yeah.
So
it was, I even feel bad about thinking about how much I made him suffer. But thank you so much for, it's interesting, because I don't know all the answers. I think I know some of them, but I feel like everything that I need to know is, okay, Will, in his view, he failed, and while he was alive, it was really difficult for him, and he gave up. And when to escape from this reality, and then he found eternity, like he would live forever, which was terrible for him, but horrible. But then I feel like there are two ways to interpret it. Like one, this is punishment, or another way is he needs to learn something from that. And I feel like it's left, the audience can interpret or feel like, oh, maybe it was a punishment, or maybe it was something that he could learn. In the end, I think it's more like towards like he could learn something, and me, as a director, writer, I felt like he was there for a reason. He needs to learn, but I'm not sure, and could go both ways. But I think it's more for people to interpret or feel like what's the reason he was there according to what happened in the film.
How much do you, we'll go back to the audience in a second, but I have a follow-up here on that idea. How much do you work with Winston on what Will's life was like? Like, how much backstory do you do on, like, what Will's humanity was like when he was in the real world? As a writer and a director, because those would be two different things. Like, you might know something as a writer that you don't necessarily communicate with Winston.
Yeah, it wasn't very super specific. It wasn't super specific. But I remember my first meeting with him, I showed a picture of my uncle. And I showed him actually pictures who show he was this handsome, smiley guy, and very artistic. He would used to draw things. He was so passionate about films and movies. I think this would be like his dream to just be part of something like this. And I remember he would just draw all these movie posters from I think the 50s or something, and they were just amazing. He was kind of Mike in some sort of way. He would draw stuff and think like everything he draw was terrible. He wouldn't show people, and he was so artistic. There's so much, he was very sensitive, but in some sort of way, I feel like he suffered from that too, And then I would, in the conversation would use a lot of, what his things and his drawings or his pictures, and Winston would say like, oh, actually, he's such a guy full of life, And then he was trying to play in a way, he was trying to understand, someone who had so much energy in life and ends up with, the way that he ended. And I think in some sort of way, all this, it was more like the context rather than saying like, we was this or that. And then for him, it was, okay, now you create the character rather than me saying exactly. And when he asked questions, then I would answer.
It worked. All right. Anybody else?
Okay. We have time for one more question.
One more question.
First of all, hello. I'm in the first row to, I guess, your right.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, yes.
It's obvious that you're going to have quite a career ahead of you, because this is really good. And I would have loved it.
Hopefully.
I would have loved it anyways, but especially so since my first grandchild was born 3 days ago in Salt Lake City. So you gave me a lot to think about. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it. I think that's all we have time for. Thank you, Edson.
Thank you so much.
Jason.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sheila.